Have you ever wondered why, no matter how much wisdom humanity collects, our societies still seem to fall into the same traps of corruption, ignorance, and self-destruction? Why is it that the loudest, most reckless, and sometimes the most foolish voices often end up steering entire nations, while the quiet thinkers are dismissed as irrelevant? This isn't just a political question. It's a deeply personal one because, whether we realize it or not, each of us contributes to this pattern. And if you're honest with yourself, maybe you've felt it. The fear that despite your intelligence, your reflection, your best efforts, you are still being quietly outmaneuvered by forces that seem, on the surface, less intelligent but far more powerful. The German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer once proposed a theory of stupidity more terrifying than evil itself. He argued that stupidity is not a lack of intelligence, but a moral failing, a surrender of responsibility. Unlike evil, which can be confronted and resisted, stupidity thrives because it is passive, collective, and worst of all, invisible to those caught in its grip. Bonhoeffer's haunting insight was that stupid people aren't aware of their stupidity. They believe themselves to be right, noble even, and that makes them dangerous. Think about it. When was the last time you argued with someone who was convinced of their own righteousness despite being catastrophically wrong? Did you notice how logic, evidence, or reason didn't matter? It felt like shadowboxing against a void. Every fact you threw at them disappeared into nothingness. That's the terrifying thing. Stupidity is not an absence of knowledge, but a shield against it. And yet, if we look through history, foolishness has not just survived, it has thrived. Plato warned us about this in the Republic. Democracy, he argued, inevitably collapses into tyranny. Why? Because when everyone has equal power without equal wisdom, the voices that flatter the crowd, that tell people what they want to hear, always rise above the voices of truth. It's easier to seduce with illusions than to teach hard realities. Take Machiavelli's warning in The Prince. Rulers don't stay in power by being virtuous. They survive by manipulation, by appearing strong, by appealing to the fears and desires of the masses. The result is a paradox. We reward leaders who exploit our weaknesses, not those who challenge us to be better. And still, the deepest cut is this. It isn't just them, it's us. Every single one of us carries within us the seed of stupidity. Every time we share a headline without reading the article, every time we retreat into echo chambers, every time we let someone else tell us what to think, instead of struggling with the complexity of truth, we are feeding the very force that shapes our world in the image of ignorance. Nietzsche knew this. He despised what he called the herd mentality, the comfort of belonging over the burden of thinking. He saw that most people would rather cling to comforting lies than endure the loneliness of truth. And perhaps you feel that too, that inner conflict between the safety of going along with everyone else and the brutal clarity of standing apart. Imagine for a moment a crowded theater. A fire breaks out silently backstage. One person notices, but instead of shouting, they whisper to their neighbor. That neighbor laughs it off. Soon, smoke begins to seep into the seats. People cough, frown, but shrug. By the time the flames are visible, panic has already spread. And here's the tragic irony. Even if 1,000 warnings were ignored, when the stampede begins, the same people who doubted, who mocked, who refused to see, will be the ones to trample others in their desperate flight. This is how civilizations fall, not in one dramatic explosion, but in a series of ignored warnings, comfortable lies, and blind obedience. Bonhoeffer called it stupidity. Nietzsche called it herd mentality. Plato called it the corruption of democracy. Machiavelli simply accepted it as reality. And here we are, centuries later, still caught in the same fire. But here's the twist. The uncomfortable truth most people don't want to face. Stupidity is not out there. It is in you. It is in me. It is the voice that says, I already know enough. It is the pride that whispers, I am too smart to be fooled. It is the arrogance of believing you are immune to manipulation. That's why the Dunning-Kruger effect feels so devastating. because it reveals how our confidence often peaks when our competence is at its lowest. So ask yourself, when was the last time you mistook your certainty for truth? When did you scroll past something you didn't understand, dismissing it as irrelevant, when in fact it was challenging the very foundation of your beliefs? When did you choose silence instead of confrontation, because speaking up would make you unpopular? The true danger of stupidity is not ignorance, it's cowardice. It is the choice to surrender our responsibility, to think, to question, to doubt ourselves. And when enough people surrender, stupidity becomes systemic. It builds leaders who mirror it, institutions that protect it, and cultures that celebrate it. But here's the paradox. If stupidity is contagious, so is courage. Every great movement in history began not with the many, but with the few. The few who refused to go along, the few who broke the spell of the herd. Socrates drank poison rather than surrender truth. Bonhoeffer was executed for resisting fascism. Nietzsche went mad for daring to challenge the foundations of morality. Their lives are warnings, but they are also beacons. Maybe this is the choice before us today, not between intelligence and stupidity, but between responsibility and surrender. Intelligence can fail, knowledge can be twisted, but responsibility, choosing to see, to act, to resist, that is where freedom begins. And maybe the reason foolishness rules the world is not because it is stronger, but because too many wise people stay silent. Because those who see clearly convince themselves their voice doesn't matter. And in that silence, stupidity thrives. So I leave you with this. The next time you feel powerless against the noise, remember that stupidity wins only when wisdom retreats. The question is not, why are they so foolish? The question is, why am I so quiet? Because in the end, civilizations don't fall because of the ignorance of the masses. They fall because of the silence of those who knew better. And maybe, just maybe, the most radical act you can commit in this world is not to be intelligent, but to refuse to surrender your responsibility to think.